to say hello. Good morning, Mick.
I surprised you for the first time.
Yeah.
And I said, Sherry, I saw you the entire time. She said, what do you mean? I said, you're right in the camera view.
Good morning. Ooh. Hi, welcome. Good morning. Shabbat Shalom. Nice to see you all again. Shabbat Shalom. I hope everyone is well. I hope that you're all doing okay. I turned the heat on. It's going to get warm in a minute. Then you'll complain it's too warm, but that's okay. It's part of the game of Torah study, right? Anyway, welcome. It's good to see everyone. Benji, welcome. Good morning. Welcome home. What's the occasion? Just visiting, or is it? No, I live here now. I do live here now. Okay, well, your old man isn't here yet, so. Good morning. It's good to see everyone. Shabbat Shalom. Following our Torah study this morning, you're all invited. There's a bar mitzvah going on. There's a big touch about today. It's a reunion, so come for that. Following that is lunch, and then following that is Parsha study with Judy. So everyone is invited to spend the whole day here at VBS if you'd like. With Ronnie's doing it today? Good, wonderful. Okay. Tomorrow afternoon, we are celebrating or commemorating the 40 years since the Iranian Revolution, 40 years of Iranian Jews coming to Los Angeles. 7 o'clock, there's a concert, a learning program, and a wonderful dessert. And everyone is invited. It costs a few dollars, but it's a beautiful program, wonderful musicians. So please come. Tomorrow night at 7 o'clock. Wednesday night, College of Jewish Studies. This year we're doing the great debates that have shaped Jewish life. And Wednesday night we're going to do where Judaism and Christianity separated. So our guest is Rabbi Ari Schwartzberg, who's actually an Orthodox rabbi. He teaches and he's one of the deans at the Shalhevet High School. And he has a degree in religion from Harvard. And he's going to talk to us about Jews and Christmas, basically. I got an Orthodox rabbi to teach Christmas. He's a wonderful guy, wonderful teacher. So that's 7 o'clock Wednesday, free cookies. Yes, what? This Wednesday. Then we're going to take a hiatus until I think it's the 8th of January. And we'll come back the 8th of January and go through the next semester. And next semester in the college on Wednesday nights, we're going to talk about the controversies of medieval Judaism, mysticism versus rationalism, the controversies that attended the founding of the Zionist movement, the Hasidic movement, and then American Judaism. And we will end at the end of February. Rabbi Farkas and I will take up the deep spiritual question of latkes versus Hamantash, the greatest debate. So please come and join us Wednesday nights. Shabbos morning Torah study we go through. So even though it's Christmas, New Year's, God knows what, we study Torah every Shabbos. So please come and enjoy that. Any other announcements? Did I leave anything out? There's a community candle lighting on Monday night the 23rd. Monday night the 23rd here at VBS. I think it's at 5:30 or so. Get the flyer. We're going to gather together, bring a menorah, bring some kids, bring a dreidel. We'll light candles. We'll have a nosh. We'll sing some songs. Those who want to stay and watch a movie can do that. And just to get together. It's a cold, cold night. And then those who'd like to leave and go eat Chinese food. I actually thought of leading a pilgrimage on the 24th to one of the better Chinese restaurants. It's like rent the whole thing out. VBS goes to Bamboo or something, you know. Because you ever been to Bamboo on Erev Christmas? You ever gone on the 24th? You could speak Hebrew and Yiddish in there. I mean, it's like wall to wall Eden. It's wonderful. There was a thing on Facebook that someone had posted a poster on the door of a Chinese restaurant. It was saying, "Dear Jewish friends, we don't know why your God likes Chinese food, but we do appreciate the business this time of year." Anyway, so come and enjoy. I hope it's a quiet week for everyone. Today we're going to split the session. I couldn't decide. I'm sorry, I tried. We couldn't decide. On the one hand, we have the denouement, the closing of the Jacob cycle, which we have to get to because it's just too delicious. And on the other side, this week is the yard site, the 5th yard site of Rabbi Schulweis, my teacher, our teacher. Last night we had a wonderful program with Uri Hersher, who's the founder and president of Skirball, who gave a lot of his own memories of Rabbi Schulweis and how they met and how they've worked together. So what I'm going to do today is we're going to try to learn for about 45 minutes. We'll learn some Torah. And then we'll close the Chumash, and I want to do a little bit of Schulweis together to learn him and hear his voice again before we finish, okay? So try and help me with that. If I screw it up, I apologize. There are some Chumashim. We are on page 198 in Parsha Vayishlach. So Vayishlach. So let's catch up where we are. Papa, is it getting warm enough for you? Because it's kind of warm over here. Yeah, you're cold. Everyone on this side of the room is cold. Everyone's hot. Okay, fine. All right. Yeah, the door's open so you get some air in here. So I suggested last time that what we have here is a classic example of what Joseph Campbell, the great mythologist, would have called the journey of the hero. The hero who leaves home, encounters along the road adversaries and allies, and in the course of his or her journey on the road, encounters themselves. They meet themselves. Specifically, they meet the parts of themselves they haven't wanted to know, the shadow part. And when they have incorporated the shadow part, when they have become whole, they make the journey homeward. But the journey homeward brings them back to a familiar place, but as a different person, as a person who has grown. The classic American example, of course, is Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz. She finds herself, as she's carried away to Oz, follows the yellow brick road, meets adversity in the Wicked Witch, meets allies in the Scarecrow and the Tin Man and the Cowardly Lion, and eventually makes her way home back to Kansas, but she's a different person. I mean, the great question at the end of the movie is, how are you going to live in Kansas in black and white when you've enjoyed the Technicolor of Oz? And that's really the end of the movie. And you know, she gives us this beautiful, there's no place like home. There's no place like home. You know, and we all know that Judy Garland had a terrible time of it as a grown-up. So obviously, once you've hit the Technicolor, it's really hard to go back. But you know, how are you different? How are you different on the way home? I told you a story once. I told it the other day to the Hazak group. Some years ago, Nina and I made an amazing discovery. I was studying in Israel and teaching in Israel, and I used to promise Nina that if she'll let me do that, I'll take her anywhere in the world on the way home she wanted to go. So each year we would do a little traveling in Europe. One year we decided to do the north of Spain down to Portugal. So we started in Barcelona, went to Girona, across to Bilbao, all right, and then down the coast to Lisbon, to Porto and Lisbon. Great trip, by the way, if you've never done it, and I have all the guidebooks if you want. I know all the good hotels to stay in. So we had worked out the trip the way we do. We plan our own travel. We do it on hotels or bookings.com. And I was trying to get a hotel for Shabbat in a little town called Santiago de Compostela. Okay? Santiago de Compostela is a little town in Spain. It happens to be the most western point of the European continent. It juts out into the Atlantic. And I'm on all of these websites, and I can't get a hotel. I can't find a hotel. They're all booked. I can't. It's the middle of summer. It's the middle of July, and it's a Saturday. I mean, why is it all booked? It's crazy. Finally, one pops up. I grab it. You know, ridiculously expensive. I said it's the only one I could find, and that we needed that part for the trip. So as we're driving from Bilbao, which is where the wonderful museum is, to Santiago, we see all these people along the road walking. Right. So we stopped and get a little coffee, and these people come and we stop and we ask them, "What are you doing?" So here's the story. Jesus had a brother named Yitzchak. His mother liked names with Yud. So he was Yehoshua, and the other brother was Yitzchak, and apparently there was a brother Yehuda. Okay? Brother Yitzchak, after the crucifixion, takes the story of Christ across the continent and settles in Santiago de Compostela, settles in a little town, a little fishing village and dies there, and is buried underneath the cathedral, right? Yitzchak in Latin is James. James in Latin is Iago. So it's Santiago, Saint Yitzchak, of the town of Compostela. Get it? It's the third most popular pilgrimage site in all of Europe. The first is Jerusalem, and then Rome, and then turns out if you can't go or you've been to Jerusalem and Rome, you make pilgrimage to Santiago de Compostela. Every summer, thousands of tourists, of pilgrims, go to Santiago de Compostela, except once every 11 years is Dia del Dio, God's Day. And then it becomes the place to be. And there's one day, which is Dia del Dio, the Day of God, and it turns out to be the Shabbos that Nina and I accidentally picked. So I said, there is a God, right? So here we are in a town. The town has a population of 40 or 50,000, except this particular weekend, the town has a population of 500,000 pilgrims. And people from all over the world are walking toward Santiago de Compostela. And the way it works is, because they've been doing this since the 11th century, they set up in all the villages on the way, day's journey away, hostels, places to stay. Towns have places to stay where you have food and you can stay there and people meet. And along the road, there are these little golden plaques that show you the way to Santiago de Compostela. And when you get there, every time you stop at a hostel, you have a little special passport that you get stamped. You go to the bishop's office. He certifies your passport that you made it the whole way on foot, gives you a certificate. You take that certificate into the cathedral for Mariv services. They daven Mariv. They have this enormous cathedral, which is usually pretty empty, except for Dia del Dio, in which it's like high holidays at Valley Beth Shalom. You can't get a seat. They do a whole service, and all your sins are forgiven. And you begin your life anew, born again in Christ, right? Now, I walked in and they said, where's your certificate? And I say, yo soy Rabino. Oh, they say, oh, Rabino! Por favor, señor! You know, they were very nice to El Rabino, you know. I didn't have a certificate. I was circumcised. That's what I had. So they we watched this. It's a beautiful service. I mean, it's a magnificent service. So Nina and I we were spaziering in the town. We actually took a walking tour of the town, and on the tour we met these two women. So one of them was a professor in Madrid, and we said, "Did you do this?" She said, "Yeah." She said, "Let me tell you." She said, "I'm not religious. I'm not religious. I did this as a little kid. When I was 11, I did this with my father, and it was one of the greatest memories of my life." She said, "And my friend here and I, our youngest kid just moved out of the house. Our youngest kid just went away to the university." And she said, "I figured it's a change in my life, and I needed something to mark the change in my life. So I decided with my friend that we would do the pilgrimage. And we've been walking. It took them 3 weeks to walk from Madrid all the way to Santiago de Compostela." She said, "We cheated. We stayed in hotels." So we're too old to stay on cots and hostels. But I said, "Why did you do it?" She said, "Well, this is what happens. You're walking. So you can think about things, you can contemplate, and you meet people along the way. You meet pilgrims from all over, and there's this wonderful sense of fellowship. But the most important thing was, when else would I have had 3 weeks to just sort of sit and rethink my life? The pilgrimage outward is a pilgrimage inward. That's the point of pilgrimage. The pilgrimage outward is a symbol of the change involved in the life inward. That's why religions have pilgrimage festivals, to give a human being a chance to do what we would call a tshuva, which is to go out, figure out who you are, and then come back the person you're meant to be. And she said it really has been a profound experience, because there's a rhythm to this. You don't walk too fast, but you walk fast enough to keep moving. And every night you sleep in a different town, and you meet people, and you hear stories, and you share music, and you share meals, and you talk to people. And she said, "I've met some extraordinary people on the way, and it's given me a chance to figure out who I want to be now that I'm not going to be an in-house, hands-on mom, the next part of my life." What's going on here is a similar kind of thing. Think of Jacob. We have Jacob's journey told over 3 Torah portions. We're introduced to him in the first one, in Toldot. We're introduced to him as this rival to his brother, this grasping personality. right? And then last week, which is Vayetze, is the journey. Vayetze, he's leaving home. He's going on the journey. He's going to meet allies and he's going to meet adversaries. He's going to meet circumstances. And all of these circumstances are going to push right into his face who he is, the parts of himself that he refuses to see. Who is Laban, his uncle? Laban is him grown up. Laban is the magic mirror that always tells the truth in the fairy tale. It's the mirror that shows you who you're going to be if you don't change your direction. Laban is the manipulator, the trickster writ large. Laban is this cold man who manipulates human beings and has no love in him. And Jacob can see who Jacob's going to become if Jacob doesn't stop being Jacob. And then he meets Rachel and he falls in love. And he gains Leah, who's the wife who shares his life tasks. And he begins having kids. And there's this amazing contest among the kids about who loves who. And he sees among his own children the rivalries that he carried out with his brother. It's like he can see his own life, but now from a third-person perspective instead of from the participant. And he can see what they're doing to each other. All of the parts of Jacob that are so difficult to face, he gets to face. Now, as I said to you last week, you've got to remember, you've got to read this on many levels. That's the story. We just read the story. Now, jump above for a moment. Jacob is us. We are B'nai Yisrael. This is collective autobiography. This is the Jewish people's reckoning with its own shadows. What's the deepest problem in the Jewish people? The deepest problem in the Jewish people is that we've misinterpreted monotheism. We thought monotheism meant one God, one blessing. If you're the second brother, you're out of luck. And the kind of rivalries, I mean, what's going on in Israel is just so typically Jewish. I'm sorry, but it is. The inability to make common cause, the inability to find common direction, the inability to listen, to let go of ego. That's Jacob and Esau, right? That's the brothers of, that's the sons of Jacob. That's Reuven and Shimon and Levi and Yehuda. This is a collective autobiography and an image of ourselves and the shadow that accompanies us in the world. And this is a political and moral polemic against those flaws within the collective people Israel. Remember where this is put together. Remember the history of this document. The stories were told from the beginning, but they were put into a document in exile. And we're sitting by the waters of Babylon. And we're asking ourselves, what the hell just happened? How did we end up here? And the answer is, because we couldn't make common cause. Mipnei sinat chinam. We couldn't make common cause. We couldn't find a way to be one people. We couldn't find a way to love each other. This is a political and a moral polemic of a people reflecting on its own condition in exile. In that case, it's a very bitter, not bitter, but it's a very honest kind of reflection, and use it. If you want to go one more level, it's not just a Jewish reflection; it's a human reflection. This is a reflection on human beings. The envy and the enmity between brothers keeps you from making common cause, and there's a blessing to be enjoyed. And the question is, you can't enjoy that blessing because you're so angry that your brother has a bigger piece of it than you do. All of us who have raised kids remember that argument. His piece of birthday cake is bigger than mine. So you say, finish the piece, I'll give you another piece. No, he can't have that. It's not fair. I don't know if you ever raised kids, but that's an interesting experience. I mean, you feel that here? So this is that kind of a text. So the question is, can you ever change? What does it take to change? So here we have Jacob. First he's fallen in love with Rachel. Then he's met Laban. Then he has this controversy with Laban, right? And then he gets the voice from God saying, time to go home, Boychik. 21 years you've been away. Time to go home. 21, of course, is 3 times 7. 7 is the completion number. You had 7 years for Rachel, 7 years for Leah, and 7 years for wealth. He gets wealthy. And he's coming back. There's only one small problem with coming back. What's the problem with coming back? Yeah, the shadow you left behind, the mess you left behind, the garbage you left behind. It's all there waiting for you. So what do? He says, coming back to meet his brother. What's going to happen? What's going to happen? And the Torah, this is a story told with such exquisite skill because there's so much suspense. You don't know what, you really, I need some music from Jaws, or else Darth Vader's start, dum, 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 da, dum. We should do that. We should write a soundtrack. David's not here. David's my musician in residence. We need a soundtrack for this, okay? So what happens? He's coming across, Jacob is coming from Mesopotamia back to Canaan. And he understands that his brother's coming to meet him. What's he going to do? So what's strategy number one? When you're facing something that you're terrified of, what tends to happen? You tend to psychologically regress. So he goes back to being the manipulative little boy he was. And if you're the manipulative little boy and you're about to get smushed, what do? Well, take a look. Page 198, you got it? Vayishlach Yaakov malachim lifnav el Esau echav. He sends messengers, achiv, right, and instructed them, you'll say to him, to my lord Esau, uha, fancy word, right? Kod tamru, la'aduni Esau, ko amar avdecha Yaakov. The language is very formal, right? You're the master, I'm the servant. I have stayed with Laban, remained. I have acquired cattle, asses, sheep, male and female slaves. I send this message to gain your favor. And the messengers returned saying, we came to your brother Esau. Guess what? Good news. He's coming with 400 men. Wait a minute. Now, Santa Claus travels with elves. I don't think these are elves. I don't think so. 400 men. That's the Bible's way of saying a whole lot, right? A whole lot. And why would you be traveling with 400 men? That's an army. That's a battalion, right? Jacob was frightened. Vayira. He was frightened. And in his anxiety, now consider this as a strategy. He divided the people with him, the flocks and the herds and the camels, into two camps. Now, when you go through the desert, how do you go through the desert? You're afraid of marauders. So what do? You put your retainers, your soldiers in the front, right? You put the cattle and stuff next, right? And then you put the people you love in the back. On the theory that if anybody observes the laws of war, they attack you from the front, right? Okay, you attack from the front. If you divide into two, what are you doing? Well, he says here, he's dividing, thinking if Esau comes to one camp and attacks it, the other one may yet escape. He's like, handling again. Or you could say that's a purposeful expression of weakness. He's actually showing obsequiousness because that's not a terribly defensible posture. Jacob said, now he makes a prayer. Now, you remember the prayer before. Remember the prayer before? The one we had when he left, right? If you let me go and you keep your promise, I'll be and bring me home with good food and nice clothes. You'll be my God and I'll give you a tenth, right? Now he prays. So what are the strategies? Number one, send messengers, right? With an obsequious message. Number two, divide the camp. Number three, pray. God of my father Abraham, God of my father Isaac, Lord who said to me, return to your native land, I'll do bountifully with you. Katonti mikol hasadim umikol ha'emet asher asita et avadecha. Katanti means I'm katan. I am too small, right? I am unworthy. I am small. I am unworthy of the kindness that you've steadfastly shown me, your staff. With my staff, I crossed the Jordan. Now I've become two camps. I'm coming back with all this wealth. I went out all by myself with a rock as a pillow. I'm coming back with a whole camp of wealth. You fulfilled your promise to me. Except if I die now, it's pretty worthless, right? Deliver me, I pray, from the hand of my brother, from Esau. I fear that if he comes and strikes me down, you have said, I'll deal bountifully with you and make your offspring as the sands of the sea, too numerous to count. So the third thing he does is pray. Do you see any difference in that prayer than the one before?
Of course.
What's the difference?
It's no longer conditional. It's now thank you, God. He's now, grateful for what has happened to him.
Yeah, the word if is missing. If you bring me, right? If. That's missing. But he's still petitioning. He's doing this out of terror. But there is somewhat of a difference. This katanti, this I'm too small for what's happened to me. What were we going to say?
Remember you promised me something?
Yeah.
Remember you promised?
Yeah, he says it twice, by the way, in the braya.
My grandchildren.
Yeah. What do they say?
Tata, you promised. We did a pinky promise.
Yeah, you promised me Hanukkah presents, right? Don't forget. It's Hanukkah's coming, too, by the way. You should know. All right, so there may be a difference in tone. It's hard to tell. All right? So number one was send a message. Number two was divide the camp. Number three was pray. Billy, yeah, what? Hang on, sorry.
But it's almost as if he's not trusting in God, because he reiterates the admonition twice that he's going to be fruitful and multiply.
Yeah, well, God told him, "Go home and I'll defend you."
Yeah, but now he's not so sure.
So why is that only the third thing that you do? Right? Okay, like I trust in God, but verify. I think it's no. I don't know. I've ever seen Valley Beshel. We have a wonderful symbol of this. We deeply believe in God, but we have earthquake straps on all the Torahs here. I don't know if you've seen in the Ark. No, I'm serious. We do. And there's something really. We'll get to Schulweis in a little while, but there's something really. It's an interesting religious message when you believe in God, but you wrap your Torahs with earthquake straps, right? Right? I believe in God. I believe that you're going to take care of me, but just in case, I'm dividing the camp. I'm sending messages. Now the fourth thing he's going to do is send a bribe, right? So on page 200, it's chapter 32, verse 14. After spending the night, he selected from what was at hand. That's a great phrase. He took it out of petty cash. I mean, how rich was he? He took it out of petty cash. What did he take? 200 goats, 20 he-goats, 200 ewes, 20 rams. If you count it up, it's all magic numbers. A lot of animals. And he put them in charge of the servant. And he said, go ahead and keep a distance. And he instructed ones. So when Esau comes, tell him, whose man are you? Tell him that these animals are ahead of you. These are all gifts. So wave after wave of gifts. Wave after wave of gifts. And hoping that each one, he might melt Esau's heart. So we've had 4 different strategies, right? Messengers, division, prayer, and now bribe. Ooh, careful. You okay? Okay? You have a place to sit? Okay, wait, it's okay. Okay, take a moment, it's okay. It's okay, take a moment. Okay, take a moment. Okay, hi Peter, good morning. Okay, good. So here comes the, here's the moment, thank you, Howard. Thanks, appreciate it. Here's the straight, look at verse 23. So we've had these, you can see the terror that he's dealing with. Right? His brother had promised to kill him. He's stolen the birthright and the blessing. When he left, he was all by himself. Frankly, when he left, he had nothing to lose. He had no property, and there was nobody in the world except himself. He was all by himself in the world. All by himself in the world. Now coming back, there's these women that he loves, there's kids, there's flocks and sheep and a whole household, right? He's got all these servants. Jacob has now become a household. There's a lot to protect, right? Freedom is another word for nothing left to lose, said a great rabbi, right? But the problem, because once you have a whole household, it becomes a whole different thing, right? When I was a young revolutionary with long hair, when I was out, it was easy to condemn material wealth, and it was easy to condemn the bourgeois lifestyle of my socialist parents, because it was just me, You add a few children to the game, and suddenly it's not me that I'm earning for, it's my kids. I want to protect them. I want my children to have opportunities. Jacob now has people that he's protecting. He's protecting these people. His fear is a different quality of fear. It's not just that he's going to kill me. I want to protect them. I'm responsible for them. His circle has opened up. But the terror is still, the terror in some ways is much deeper, right? You want to take me, take me. Just leave my kids alone. So what happens? That same night, look at verse 23. Taking his 2 wives, his 2 maidservants, his 11 children, he crossed the ford of the Yavok. So the Yavok is the river. It's a tributary of the Jordan. But the name Yavok, if you look at it in Hebrew, looks an awful lot like Yaakov. It's like Yaakov spelled backwards, right? He's crossing the Yavok because he's figuring out who is Yaakov. And then he takes them across the river. After taking them across the stream, he sent across all of his possessions. But he stayed on the other side. So the man who starts this journey all by himself ends this journey all by himself. You get this? You see how that works? And here's the weird moment. Jacob was left alone. Vayivater Yaakov livado. So the man who has spent 21 years building a family, loving these women, birthing children, welcoming children, building wealth, building a home, seeing the fulfillment of his blessings. Here he is once again at night, all by himself, under the starry sky, with nothing but a rock for a pillow, just like he began. Except now it's different, because he's gone through all of this. He's gone through all of this. And tomorrow he will meet his fate, and he doesn't know what it is. This is the long, dark night of the soul. So what happens? Now the next section is the next section is ambiguous. I think it's purposely ambiguous. I think this is the Bible's way of saying, use your imagination. This is great storytelling. Just phenomenally great storytelling through ambiguity instead of specificity. Someone had a question, yes? Wait, we got a microphone so you can be famous all over the world. Thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah. Jacob has a lot of money, slaves, and all of this. He could hire or buy a lot of slaves, come back to Esau, and defeat him. Why he comes and he's so afraid, and he didn't want to fight him or defeat him?
Well, yeah, so the question is, with all of his money, why doesn't he hire an army to protect him? Right? I don't know. What do you think? Either Esau is too powerful even with an army, right? Or Jacob, and in a war you would have, if he shows up with a big army, that provokes Esau. Or there's something else here. Well, there are mercenaries. You can always, there's always mercenaries, Mel. Pinkerton, You can always hire mercenaries.
Probably he wants to face himself.
That's because I think that's true. I think this isn't just about being afraid to die. It's about being afraid of the mess you left behind. He has to come back and face himself. And remember, Jacob is his twin brother. Now they're not identical. They're fraternal because they're different, right? But it's been 20 years.
This is his conscience.
Well, we'll get to that in a minute. The conscience is coming in just 1 minute. Watch. So here we go. Ready? V'yavater Yaakov levado. V'ya'avek ish imo. Translation, a man wrestled with him. What? He's left alone. If he's left alone, then what man? A man wrestled with him. Ad alot hashachar, until the dawn of the day. Okay? So who is this man? And what is he wrestling? And what a strange, interesting image, wrestling. V'yavek, struggle. Avek means to struggle. When was the last time Jacob physically struggled? In the womb. Remember? He struggled in the womb with his brother. V'yavek, it's the same word. So, there's something, he's struggling. Now, is he struggling with his conscience? Is he struggling with his imagination? Is he struggling with an angel? According to the Midrash, this is an angel who comes, it's Esau's angel. Is he struggling with Esau? Does Esau come to fight with him that night? Is it not Esau himself, but Jacob's image of Esau? And remember, Jacob is now 21 years older, but the image of Esau he has in his mind, right? It's like going to your high school reunion and you see your high school girlfriend, and you're 40 years older, but in your imagination, she's still the 18-year-old you remembered, right? But when you see her, you say, oh my God, you're a grandmother, you know? But so you get that, you see, so his struggle is something that he's wrestling with. When he saw that he had not prevailed, who saw that who had not prevailed? You see the ambiguity of the sentence? Vayar ki lo yachol. Lo yachol means he wasn't able. He wasn't able. Lo yachol lo. Vayiga, and he touched. Vayiga means to touch. But kaf yirachol, the socket, the pocket of your hip, of his hip. And so that the socket was strained as he wrestled him. So it's a very strange sentence. It's a very ambiguous sentence. Then he said, let me go, for dawn is breaking. But he answered, I will not let you go unless you bless me. Said the other, what is your name? He said, Jacob. Said he, your name shall no longer be Jacob, but Israel, Yisrael. For you have striven, you have struggled, Sarita, with beings divine and human, and you have prevailed. Pray, tell me your name. He said, you must not ask my name. But he took leave of him there. So Jacob named the place Peniel, meaning I have seen a divine being face to face, yet my life has been preserved. What happened? What the hell just happened? What happened? What happened? He had a dream. And what happened in the dream? Who has the mic? What happened in the dream? Mickey, what happened in the dream?
I think he saw the wrestling with himself.
He saw the wrestling with himself. Who won? When you wrestle with yourself, who wins?
I think your better self wins.
Okay, so the better self wins, but two other things happen, right? One, he's wounded, and two, he's renamed. What happens when you wrestle with your better self? Do you get wounded? Right? There is a custom, by the way, I tell this to bar mitzvah kids who piss me off. There's a custom among many, many, many tribes in the world that when a young man comes of age and passes the ordeal of manhood, he gets wounded. They scar him or they wound him in some way. And the scar, the wound, represents the struggle with his younger self, the birth of his new self, his adult self, and he wears that scar with pride the rest of his life. Sort of a dueling scar or right? I tell young men, you think having a Haftorah and learning a Torah portion is hard? Let me tell you what I'm going to do to you, right? Kid says, no, I'll do the Haftorah. So you either you do the Haftorah or I'm going to sear you with this branding iron, you know. One kid told me once, go ahead, I don't want to learn the Haftorah. I said, I was kidding. He said, I knew it, you know. No, but this idea that the new self is born, but born with a wound. And he's going to limp. It's an interesting wound, by the way, because the thigh always represents a sexual wound, right? Yeah. So there's a limp. There's something's broken. You can struggle with your better self, but you're not whole in the end. But the limp, you gladly accept it because you survived the struggle. You gladly accept it. He gets blessed also, and he gets a new name. What is the new name? Now, Yaakov meant what?
Heel.
The heel, meaning the grasping personality. What does Yisrael mean?
Wrestles with God.
Wrestles with God. It's face to face. No more manipulation. Now, here's the strange thing about this. Abraham was Avram and became Avraham. Sarah was Sarai and becomes Sarah. Never again is he called Avram, and never again is she called Sarai. But you'll see through the narrative that he is alternatively called Yisrael and Yaakov. What's that mean? He keeps wrestling with himself, or you're doing a wonderful job, Douglas. I know. All that study at the University of Virginia. Douglas is a very talented attorney in his day job. He just plays Carol Merrill or Vanna White here in Schultz. Please.
Jacob does not stop wrestling with himself, the good with the bad. So that's why the Bible refers to him as Yaakov and Israel. I
Yeah.
guess the Israel is the good part, and Yaakov is the old part where he was.
The change is never permanent. He regresses. All of us who do tshuva regress. It's a very different. My daughter is a clinical psychologist who works with people with addiction. Regression, to go back and use again, is very common in the process of becoming sober, and it's a common process because you're dealing with the darker sides of yourself, and they're still there. They're still there. You can work on them and you can overcome them. That's why you go to meetings, AA meetings, all the time for the rest of your life, because it's in constant. You're always in recovery. You're always in recovery. So here is Jacob, who's always in recovery, and he has the vision of becoming Israel. He has a vision of becoming whole. He has the vision of becoming the better self. But it's a difficult process. Pop, wait. Get the mic.
Look, you're faced with a problem.
Yeah.
In the old days, you would solve it the mamzer way. Now you got tshuva, so you try to do it a better way.
Yeah.
But you still run into a couple of hang-ups. So you have to resort back to only some of the mamzer ways.
Yeah.
In order to get the problem solved.
Yeah.
So you don't fully be a mamzer, but you don't fully be a good guy.
Yeah.
You use both now to solve the problem. But the problem now requires certain mamzer ways to solve.
So you're suggesting that when Michael Corleone goes to Las Vegas and says that the family is now a straight business family, they didn't really exactly mean it? Is that what you were?
Correct. They didn't stop the money coming in from the other couple.
Yeah, okay. You have to go back to the mamzer ways of solving problems, huh? Up to a point. But can you live with yourself if you do that?
You have no choice. It's the only way you know how to solve problems.
Okay, that's interesting. Okay, yeah, please. Hi, Shem.
Hi. So when we remember the patriarchs, we don't remember Yisrael, we remember the heel.
Yeah, isn't that interesting?
But Avraham is
Yep.
not Avram.
Yeah, that's true. So why is that?
Yeah, why?
Tell me why. No, come on. You're organizing a religious tradition. What do you want us to learn from this life? I mean, if I were to say Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yisrael, but there are places, by the way, where you say that. In the bris ceremony, you say that. Avraham. If I said Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yisrael, you'd say, "Oh, we're finished. We did it. We completed our process of transformation." But if I say Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, you're left with what?
More to do.
Yeah. The dark side is still there. The dark side is still there. And I tell you, you have to read the story on many levels. The dark side is still, you're not done yet. You're not finished. The process isn't finished, right? All right, here we go. You ready? We got to find out what happens. Chapter 33, page 203. You have to read this with some suspense, right? So I need some suspenseful music. Hitchcock had good suspenseful, you know. Jaws, right? But I actually think the better one is Darth Vader, right? Dum, 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 da-dum, dum, da-dum. Here comes Esau, coming up. Looking up, Jacob saw Esau coming. That's the next line. You see where that there's a chapter break there, but in the Torah, there's no chapter break. So the story of him wrestling, the next thing it says, looking up, he saw Esau coming. That's just astonishing, right? Accompanied by 400 men. He divided the children, Leah, Rachel, two maids, putting the maids and their children first, Leah, children next, Rachel and Joseph last. Why? That's the order of affection, right? He loves Rachel the most. He puts her at the back where she's protected. He himself went on ahead. Why did he do that? That's the change. What would you have expected him to do?
Stay with
Rachel and Joseph.
Stay at the back. Why would you have because that way, right. But he goes on ahead. And he bows 7 times until he's near his brother. What's his brother coming to do?
We don't know yet.
Yes, you don't know. What do you think he's coming to do? To kill him, right? Esau ran to greet him. To greet him, in Hebrew, likrato doesn't mean to, oh, how are you, greet him. It means to meet him. Esau runs at him. You see the suspense here? Right?
So it's not to greet him.
Likrato, right? Toward him. Right. You don't know for what purpose yet. Esau ran to greet him, right? He embraced him.
Who is he?
That's the point. That's exactly the right. It's you don't know. He embraced him. This story's full of ambiguity. That's the point, right? Falling on his neck. Still don't know what he's going to do. He kissed him. He kissed him. He didn't kill him, right? And they wept. This is the second time Jacob weeps. Remember the first time Jacob weeps? The first time Jacob cries is when he sees Rachel. Remember, the boy falls in love. His heart opens up. He rolls the stone off the well. Something opens up inside of him. Now something opens up inside of him. This is the first time he weeps is because he falls in love with Rachel. The second time he weeps is because he's alive. He survived. And in some strange way, he falls in love with his brother.
Yes.
He realizes he can love this brother. And he doesn't have to compete with this brother. Right? And they fell on one another's necks and they kiss each other and they cry. And he cried. Right? Who are these, he said? These are the children God has favored me. And now they introduce himself. But here's the most important line. The most important line is when he looks into each other's face, right? And he looks into each other, he says, who are these? He says, these are the maids. And he introduces him to all the kids. And he said, what was all that junk you sent me? And he said, it's a gift from the goodness that I have enjoyed in the world, right? And look at verse number 10. Jacob said, no, I pray you, if you would do me this favor, accept this gift from me. For to see you is like seeing the face of God. Where have we heard that phrase before? Yeah, there's Moses and the rock, but just now, where did you see that phrase? Right, he said, right, Peniel, I wrestled with God and won. Right, I looked into the face of a divine being. To see you is like seeing the face of God. But wait a minute, they're twin brothers, and it's been 21 years. When he looks into his brother's face, what does he see? Right. Remember, there are no mirrors in the world. You understand that mirrors don't exist until the late Middle Ages. You can look into a pond, I guess. But when you look into your brother's face, what do you see? You see your own self. He finally sees his own self. Two brothers who have grown. What has Esau been doing all this time? It's been 21 years. What's Esau been doing?
We don't know.
Come on, you know what he's been doing. What's he been doing?
Holding a grudge.
Taking care of his elderly mother and father. Getting married, raising children, building a family. You think Esau's grown a little bit? You think he's grown out of his rage and his pain? You think he's gained blessing? 400 men, that's an expensive proposition. And he basically inherited the family's wealth because Jacob split. So Esau now owns all of Isaac and Abraham's wealth. Right? Esau's changed. Jacob's changed. Two men face each other, and they're able to put away their animosity, their pain, their rage, their jealousy for each other, and kiss each other. And when he realizes that, he says, that's what it means to see the face of God. Arnie. Wait, you're famous here. Come on.
There's the vampire image.
Yes, right. All right, there's the vampire image, right. All right, so on page 204, everybody see page 204, which is chapter 33, verse 4, the second to the on the top of the page. You see the word Vayishlach in Hebrew? He kissed him. You see the little diamonds? You see the little diamonds above each letter? That's the way it's written in the Torah. There are half a dozen scribal quirks in the Torah. Just a half a dozen. Few little weird things. This is one of them. Nobody knows why. Nobody knows where the tradition came from. But there is a tradition that in the Torah itself, not only is the word written, but there's a little diamond written above each letter. So the Midrash is...
He became a vampire and he bit him on the neck.
Right. That this is winking at you, and those little diamonds represent teeth. That what Esau did was grab him, hold him, and bite him on the neck. And at that moment, Jacob's neck became marble. And he couldn't kill him. Why does the Midrash teach that? Why does the Midrash teach that? It's exactly the opposite of what we just read. In that reading of the story...
They're flattening out Esau to be the metaphor for all bad guys.
Right. Esau's wearing the black hat, Jacob's wearing the white hat, and the white hat guy and the black hat guy meet, and they don't reconcile. He keeps going on being Esau, the bad guy. Esau is Edom. Edom is Rome. Edom is the church. Edom is all the enemies of the people of Israel who've come to kill us. And they embrace us. And it's a great anti-assimilationist metaphor. Good Hanukkah story. Right? They're going to embrace you. Oh, they're going to say, welcome to our country. We're so glad you're here. They're going to say, oh, you're a citizen like everybody else. Just let them embrace you, because the next thing they're going to do is suck the blood out of your veins. This is Esau as enemy. And Jacob's neck becomes like stone because God protects him. Right? That's a different metaphor. It's a different story.
And his teeth break and he cries later.
And later he cries, right. It's a different story, right? It's a different story. It's a much angrier story. But it's a story that reduces all the ambiguity and all of the beautiful ambivalence of the story into simple black and white moralities. But it's also a story that Jews told for many, many, many generations, because they did live among peoples who embraced us and then tried to kill us. Right? We did have that experience. So that's why that's the Midrash. That's the Midrash. That's not the original reason. It's the Midrash of why the little diamonds are above that letter. Those letters in the Torah. Good. Yes, please.
Hold on.
Wait, you become famous here.
Is there any similarity or difference or comparison when we were a stiff-necked people?
Yeah, that could be. That's a nice extension of that idea. So the conclusion. I'm going to pass these around. I want to do just 10 minutes of Rabbi Schulweis. Remember his yahrzeit. So the continuation of the story is quite spectacular, because you have here a reconciliation of the brothers. You have a reconciliation of the brothers. So you have 7 brother stories in the Torah: Cain and Abel, the sons of Noah, Abraham and his brother Lot, his nephew, Isaac and Ishmael, Jacob and Esau, and Joseph and his brothers. Everybody got one of these? They're coming, I promise you. You can share. There's plenty here. You share a few. You can. The end of the story here is benign. He finds his own wholeness, but more specifically, he finds a wholeness with himself, and he finds a wholeness with his brother. But the story doesn't end, because it's going to be carried into the next generation. The same rage and pain and brokenness gets carried into the next generation. And you have to sort of ask yourself why we chose to tell these stories. We could have told much more benign stories. Just take one for every 2 people. We're going to read it together. You could have told a much more benign story about the development of our people. We'll share them. If you have an extra one, pass it over here. Got a few more. Okay, just share it. Can you share one? You guys share one? Okay. I know I want to stop with the Torah minute so you can close the Chumash. Friday is Rabbi Schulweis's 5th yard site. Harold Schulweis came to Valley Beth Shalom in 1970. He had served for 18 years in Oakland, California. Born in the Bronx in 1925. Educated at the Jewish Theological Seminary and at NYU. He was the student of two great teachers, of Mordechai Kaplan and of Sidney Hook. Sidney Hook, both of whom, by the way, interestingly, studied with John Dewey at Columbia. Kaplan went into Judaism and Hook went into socialism and other social philosophies. The seminary felt that Schulweis was a troublemaker, so they sent him as far away from New York as they could get him, Oakland, knowing full well that, as Gertrude Stein once said, there's no there. But the wonderful thing is, because God has purposes in history, Oakland, as you can imagine, between 1952 and 1970, becomes ground zero for every social movement that's going to affect America. So he is the rabbi at Beth Abraham, which is 2 miles from the Berkeley campus, on the day that the student movement begins in 1964. And he is the rabbi a few miles away from Haight-Ashbury when the counterculture is launched in 1967. And he is the rabbi when the civil rights movement flowers in Oakland, and the Black Panther movement is founded in Oakland in the late 60s and early 70s. And this is where Schulweis and feminism is going. Every social movement that's going to affect 20th century, late 20th century America, Harold's like right on the spot. Just really right on the spot, which is quite remarkable. In 1970, he comes to VBS and was our rabbi until his passing in 2014, 5 years ago this week. He's an extraordinary public intellectual, theologian, prophetic figure. So I look for he wrote an awful lot because he gave sermons, and sermons became articles, and articles became books. So I wanted to find just one short section we could learn for a few moments. So in 2000 something, around 2000, the magazine Shema, which is this tiny little magazine of Jewish thought, edited by Gene Borowitz, asked a dozen or so great thinkers to write a one-page summary of everything they believe in. Right? The NPR has this program called This I Believe. So this was a Jewish version of This I Believe. So Harold put his whole theology on one page. Not an easy thing for him, by the way. Some of you remember his sermons could be lengthy. Right. There's a reason he lived to be almost 90, he wasn't finished talking. So Shema asked him 3 questions, right? What about the existence of character of God? What about the locus of authority beyond the self? Locus means place. Does Torah command you? Is there a sense of mitzvah? What is the authority of Torah in your life? And finally, the nature and content of our covenant with God. And Schulweis has to take, these are huge questions, and he takes all of his theology and he sort of smushes it down into this format. So let's take a look together. He begins, I believe with Franz Rosenzweig that truth is a noun only for God. For us, it's an adverb. I know nothing of God as a noun. I know from the collective experiences of my people recorded in sacred texts and from my own experiences only the gerunds, that is the ing words of God, healing the sick, clothing the naked, housing the homeless, pursuing peace, loving my people and my neighbors. I am bound to testify to the verbs of God by the adverbs of my conduct. God is behaved. All right, quickly, for theology, for beliefs in God, there are many questions that one could ask. How do you know God is real? How do you understand God's reality? Do you have experiences of God? Has God spoken to you? And all of these are questions that theologians will try to answer as they stake out a theology, a belief in God. For Schulweis, there is one question that destroys every theology, and that's what's called the question of evil, why bad things happen to good people. Now, in previous generations, and even in this generation, people can have all sorts of beautiful mystical ideas of God and sort of close their eyes to that question. Harold couldn't. Rabbi Schulweis couldn't do that for three principal reasons. Principal reason number one is he was a congregational rabbi, which means on a daily basis he faced people suffering. And he told a story, and I know this story because I happen to know the family involved. He came to VBS, and a few years after he got to VBS, there was an incident. And the incident was this. There was a family that had come for Yom Kippur, and they had a teenage son. And the son wanted to go with some friends after Yom Kippur for a breakfast and a party. And the father said, stay in shul till services are over. And then you'll go. And the kid agreed to stay in shul till services are over. So their chauffeur blew, and the kid took the car, and the kid was driving over Malibu Canyon, and a drunk driver crammed into the car, and the kid was killed. So this is right after Yom Kippur. The rabbi goes to the family's home. And the family, of course, friends, neighbors, everyone's there. And the father of the kid is sitting in the bedroom in the dark. And the rabbi goes in to give him a hug. And the guy says, you son of a bitch, I don't want to see you. I never want to talk to you again. Get out of my face. And the rabbi said, I'm sorry. And the wife, the mother of the kid, says, Rabbi, don't take it personally. It's an interesting encounter. The rabbi says, I do take it personally. Right? Because somehow this guy understands that, if you're in Yom Kippur, nothing bad should have been able to happen to you. That kind of theology. And the rabbi, he'd been speaking about this idea for many years, but that event just sort of catalyzed it, that if you believe in a God who controls all things in the universe, then bad things shouldn't have to happen. And if bad things have to happen, bad things happen to us, it's impossible to believe in a God who controls all things in the universe. That's sort of the conclusion that he came. So what he does instead is offer something called predicate theology, which is really simple. I could explain it to you in a minute because I explained it to the fourth graders, right? If you put on a blackboard a series of propositions, right? God is just, God heals the sick, God cares for the poor, God makes justice, right? And then you put on the other side of the blackboard, healing the sick is godly, feeding the hungry is godly, caring for the poor is godly. If I asked how many believe in these propositions, some of you would say yes. But then you'd all have questions. Well, if God really does heal the sick, how come there's sick people? Nice people who get sick. If God really feeds the hungry, how come there are hungry people? Hang on a second. Let me finish. Okay? But if I ask how many people believe in these, everyone's hands goes up. Because Schulweis says, what's the purpose of religion? To teach about a God who lives up there and does all this stuff? Or to teach about a set of acts that we associate as godly? Godly is an adverb or an adjective. It means an act which is of ultimate value. And he would suggest that that's really what religion is about. Religion is not about teaching that there is a God up there. There may be a God up there, but frankly, that's irrelevant to the life I'm going to live. In the life I'm going to live, I want to know what actions are godly. So I ask my fourth graders, the word God, is it a noun or a verb? What is a noun? Kids say, oh, I know, a person, place, or thing. Okay, so if God is a noun, you can point to it. What about if God is a verb? What is a verb? Something you do. Good. Can you do God? Like if I ask you, how is your Godding going? Are you any good at Godding? Well, I said, what would be involved in Godding? And the kids get this right away. Schulweis said that he got this idea. I know where he really got the idea, but he said he got the idea from the bracha, right? Baruch atah Adonai melech haolam, hamotzi lechem min haaretz, right? Praised is God, ruler of the universe, who brings bread from the earth. Okay, so you're praising the subject God who does this. But the truth of the matter is, if your whole purpose of religion is to praise God, then all you should have said is Baruch atah Adonai melech haolam, period. You don't need the end of the sentence. Why do you add the predicate? Why do you add the end of the sentence? Because it's the end of the sentence that's really the important part. Number one, because that's what God is in the world to us, our relation to God. And number two, because that's what we're called upon to do. So I asked Harold once, I said, you for a Reconstructionist, you pray like a chassid. How come you pray? He says, it's really simple. I figured out a way to pray. You just add 2 words to every prayer. Through me. Through me. Baruch atah Adonai rofei cholim. Praised is God who heals the sick through me. Praised is God who makes peace through me. Praised is God who heals the world through me. If you add that, it changes the whole focus of prayer. That's Schulweis's predicate theology. Basically, he says, I'm agnostic about the existence of a God up there. What I do know is that the place to find God is in here. And therefore, the question isn't, I'm not interested if you believe in God. I'm interested in if you live God, if you behave godly. Godliness is what religion is about. And this was his answer to the evil in the world, because the second thing that he saw, besides that terrible event and all the other suffering that a rabbi encounters, the second thing he encountered, of course, was the Holocaust. And like every philosopher of the 20th century, he had to deal with how do you go on believing in a God after the ultimate act of evil, after 1 million Jewish children are destroyed purposefully and mechanically and technologically. And the answer is, I can't believe in a God who sits in heaven and watched that happen and not did anything about it. What I do know is that there is goodness, there is godliness in the world. So he went looking for godliness. And he said, look, if I'm going to believe in this, I have to believe in it even in the worst of circumstances. So in 1963, he's at a community dinner at the Fairmont Hotel in San Francisco. And that dinner, the Fairmont Hotel in San Francisco is owned by a philanthropist that he knew very well, a man named Benjamin Swig. And Mr. Swig says, Rabbi, I want you to meet somebody. And he introduces Harold to the maintenance supervisor of the hotel, this big man in coveralls, whose name was Fritz Graebe. And he says, Fritz, tell him your story. Fritz Graebe is German national. Before the war, he was a member of the Nazi Party. Good German. He was a contractor, construction contractor. He had contracts to build German defense installations on the eastern border in Ukraine. He started watching what the Nazis were doing. He was a civilian contractor, and he was watching what the Nazis were doing, destroying Jewish communities. And he decided, this can't be. This is not German. So he started using his construction company in a very curious way. He procured more and more contracts with the Germans, and he got the Germans to give him Jewish slave laborers. And he pulled Jews out of concentration camps and off of trains and put them on his labor manifestos. As long as they were on his labor manifestos, just like Schindler, they were protected from the Gestapo, from the SS. By the war's end, he had 5,500 Jews on his labor manifestos. And the Nazis caught on, so they went to arrest him. He crossed the lines and gave himself up to the Americans. The Americans imprisoned him for a while and then made him a witness at Nuremberg. Then he became an anathema to his neighbors, so he came to America. He saved 5,500 Jews during the Holocaust. This maintenance, and he's working as a maintenance supervisor in the Fairmont Hotel, right? So Harold says, what did we ever do to say thank you to you? And he said, I didn't really thank you. But Schulweis, that's where he got the idea of creating a foundation to recognize the righteous. But the recognition of Christian rescuers of Jews during the Holocaust is part of his theology. Because if you do believe that somehow godliness is real in the world, then it has to exist in all places, in all possibilities. And if a guy like Fritz Graebe, who is a Nazi, decides to risk his life and his family and his possessions to protect Jews during the Holocaust, then you know that it's real in the world. And that becomes Rabbi Schulweis's obsession. The arguments for God's existence and goodness are not furnished by inductive or deductive logic. You don't prove God's existence. The evidence is in our mouth, our hands, and our feet. The way you behave is a demonstration that there is or isn't God in the world. Individually and collectively, we are verifiers of God's reality. If you are my witnesses, there's a line in the book of Isaiah that says, you are my witnesses and I am God. And the Midrash concludes with these words, if you are my witnesses, then I am God. But if you are not my witnesses, then I am not, as it were, God. Religious beliefs are conditional. They demand our behavioral testimony. God is nameless, and it is blasphemous to pronounce it as if we know his essence. On this, rationalists and mystics agree. It is equally blasphemous to deny the name of God's qualities. So atheism isn't to say I don't believe in God there. Atheism is to say, I don't believe that there's a set of qualities which are godly in the world. Okay? What is it? Look at the last paragraph. What does it mean that you and I believe? What does the answer tell me about you and you or myself? Not whether we believe, not whether we obey, but what kind of God we believe in and what kind of imperatives we're prepared to obey reveal the meaning of our faith. So to tell me that you believe in God is irrelevant because I don't know what kind of person you are. Watching your personality and how you relate in the world is a much better indication of whether you live a godly life than your professions of belief. So this is Schulweis's notion of predicate theology. This is how he answered the fundamental questions of God. A lot of people find this really unnerving because it takes away him. And it puts all the onus on us. Right? Because when you say, where was God in the Holocaust? The answer is, where were you? Why didn't God stop that hurricane? Why didn't you? Why doesn't God cure cancer? Why don't you? That's the question. Every religious question turns reflexive from there to here. And the God within is the God that Schulweis worships. And you need to know about him as a person. I spend an awful lot of time with him. He really believed this. This wasn't just a way of getting out of believing. This wasn't just a philosophical magic trick. He was driven. He was absolutely driven in his ethics. I mean, he was one of these guys that for whom ethical problems kept him up at night. He was absolutely driven in his beliefs. And when ethical things happened in the world, and without getting political, I shudder to think what he would be like today. He'd be a lot less nice than me. He would explode with rage because for him, godliness to him he was as serious about godliness as the most Orthodox Jew you know is serious about mitzvot. That's his religion. He's a profoundly religious man. This is what we are in the world to do. So then, if you look beyond that, where does godliness come from? It's not handed down from on high, right? The locus of authority means who tells me what to do. Hi, guys, come in and have a seat. There's plenty of room, and you shouldn't have to stand. It's dangerous when a rabbi's talking to stand up. It's great to see you. Thanks for coming. Your class is over already? I believe that the sources of authority that help form my life decisions are multiple and interactive. They are derived from inherited texts and commentaries, from the history of my people, from law and lore, from sources of my Jewish conscience. Conscience was something he believed in. Conscience was something, he said, where is conscience in our religious education? Where is conscience in our religious discourse? Conscience is both formed by our experiences and our learning, and it forms us. So there are elements of revelation understood not as fixed final words cast down from above, nor capricious projections thrown on high from below. Revelation involves an ongoing process of listening and interpreting, receiving and giving, accepting and transformation. So revelation is not God on Mount Sinai shouting down, Feinstein, no lobster! That's not revelation. Revelation is a conversation. It's a conversation with human experience. It's a conversation among us as a community. It's a conversation with the events of our lives in which we clarify what the God within demands of us. There is no absolute to that because it's always relative to our experience and to the moments we're in. But on the other hand, it's not entirely of our own making. If you've ever had a pang of conscience, if you've ever had something where you say, I really want to do this, but I know it's wrong. I mean, think about that dynamic for a minute. There's something which is of you but not of you guiding your behavior in that moment. It would be expedient, right? The clerk gives you too much change. I gave her a $10 bill, and instead of giving me a 1 back, she gave me a 20. I could have walked away. I would have made $19 on the deal. I would have paid for my lunch. But I stop and say, I'm sorry, I don't think that's the right change. Count it again. And she says, oh, I made a mistake. You can do the pragmatic expedient, but sometimes you say, it's just, that's not me. That's not the person I choose to be in the world. That transaction is a transaction between your conscience, your experience, and moments in life. And that's what we all do. That's how we gain moral wisdom. It would be convenient if you could sit quietly and God would tell you what to do. I told you, my Christian friend says when he has a problem, he prays on it and God tells him what to do. And he says, Ed, do you do that? I say, no, I ask my wife, you know. She tells me what to do. It would be wonderful if God whispered in your ear, do this. But that's not how the world works. You transact, and it's a conversation between past and present, between conscience and pragmatism, between community. We do it together as a community. That's for Rabbi Schulweis what Torah is. It's the beginning of the conversation. What we do here is Torah. It's the conversation. Torah is not the book. The book's only the catalyst. Torah is the conversation. It's when we all gather our experience together and figure out what the heck this means. What does it mean for a man to wrestle with his worst parts and his best parts? That's the conversation. That's Rabbi Schulweis' notion of Torah. The last one is his notion of mitzvah. Ready? I believe that the unique character of the biblical covenant articulates the distinctive nature of Jewish theistic humanism. That's a great phrase. Try that in conversation today. Theistic, meaning I believe in God. Humanism, I believe in people. He doesn't believe that they're contradictory because he believes in a God within. He believes that the place you hear the voice of God is within. Theistic humanism. The covenant runs both ways. Our moral law in heaven, one moral law in heaven and earth. God does not exempt himself from the rules and sensibilities of the compact. The reciprocity of the Jewish covenant encouraged the holy dissent unparalleled in other theistic traditions. Abraham says to God, you can't do that. You can't destroy that city because there are good people in that city and you can't do it. And God says, you're right. That's holy dissent. So for Schulweis, religion has two contradictory impulses because all human things have contradictory impulses. They're dialectical. Religion is about obeying and about disobeying, and they're both holy. There's a time to obey and a time to disobey, out of holiness. Right? If a religion tells you just obey, 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 run, that's not religion. That's totalitarianism. But if a religion tells you disobey, 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 you should also run, because that's anarchy. But moral religion teaches you to obey and to disobey. To obey and to disobey. And that's his answer. That's what faith is all about. Now, if you had to choose the balance, Harold, by his nature, was more disobey than obey. Right? He was much more in favor of the Sodom and Gomorrah Abraham than of the Akedah Abraham. Because his problem was that there are too many voices in the world now that are demanding obedience, and too few people who are saying, hang on a minute, that's wrong. And he really loved holy dissenters. He really loved holy rebels. I told you, for his birthday, I tried to get him excommunicated. I actually called all these Orthodox scholars, but they wouldn't excommunicate him. Because the holy dissenters that he loved, Spinoza, Kaplan, Uriel da Costa, he wanted to be in their company, but they wouldn't excommunicate him. Where there is no biblical or rabbinic term for conscience, its status and power within the covenant are instantiated throughout the prophetic tradition and in major portions of the rabbinic midrash. In moments of moral and spiritual conflict, particularly where two or more goods or rights clash, the inner witness to the covenant may rise to dissent even against the established law. Right? So Harold said, look, I was at this rabbinical program where he gave this talk, and it's just wonderful. The book of Leviticus says, and a man who lies with another man is an abomination and should be taken out and killed. Now, you can find all kinds of really clever halachic, midrashic ways to undo that. Schulweis didn't buy it. He said, it's wrong. It's just dead wrong. The Bible doesn't understand homosexuality the way we do. So you can use all of your clever techniques, but the fact is, let's just say what it is. It's wrong. And there's nothing wrong with saying something in the Torah is wrong, because the Torah taught us the values that lead us to believe that it's wrong. It taught us that human beings are created in the image of God. It taught us that human beings should not live alone, but should bond with one another. It taught us to recognize conditions of the human being that are not over our choice. It taught us how to determine that that particular law is just dead wrong. So just say it's dead wrong. Right? I was when my wife was struggling to become a rabbinical student, Harold stood up at a rabbinical convention and said, the exclusion of women from rabbinical study is just wrong. Don't give me bavamaises. It's just wrong, and we know why it's wrong. It's taken us 3,000 years to recognize it, but now we see it, it's wrong. Right and wrong. Interesting religious categories, no? Right? So he said, you have to fight for that which is right. The moral drama is played out as sacred dissent against God in the name of God. Why doesn't God smush Abraham when he says he can't? Because it's in the name of God. The wrong turn to God. Those wrong turn to God within God, the conscience within God, as a court of last appeal. In numerous episodes recorded in the rabbinic tradition, God recognizes the voice of moral conscience as his own. God honors the moral dissent without recrimination. The role of conscience implicit in the reciprocal covenant demonstrates the condescension of God and the elevation of the human creature. So he said to us, the evidence of religious life in the world is the moral sensitivity that you carry into the world. And if Jews carry moral sensitivity into the world, then they're doing what God has asked us to do. His yahrzeit is on Friday. We remember him with great love. Zecher Tzadik Livracha. Have a good Shabbos, everyone. Take care. Lowering God to raise man.